Under oath, under oath, under oath. You gotta say it clear. The truth, the whole truth, ringing in our ear. Sales persuasion, sure, but honesty's the goal. Under oath, that's how we roll.
Welcome to Under Oath, where revenue takes the stand. If you're new here, Under Oath is the definitive podcast for revenue leaders in the legal industry. We decode the entire revenue engine inside world-class sales teams, vendors, and law firms. From intake to marketing, from leadership to hiring, and the technology that drives it all. Think of us like the intersection of company operations, growth strategy, and revenue intelligence, and we talk about it all. Let's welcome back the defense. First, we got Zach Ramey, head of revenue at Rankings.io. Myself, Scott Knudson, Director of Revenue Operations at Rankings, and of course our ringer, Cole Castleberry, the head of sales at Rankings. Gentlemen, welcome back. Before we get into today's charge, do we got anything to bring to the bench?
So I'm going to go back to sports for mine, and the Lakers really need a center desperately. They got beat last night. They were supposed to beat the Timberwolves, 5 games. They got beaten 5 games. It was heart-wrenching.
Do you think it impacts LeBron's legacy? I mean, I think a lot of people were hoping he'd make it a little bit further this time.
I'm personally I'm a Lakers fan because of Kobe. At the end of the day, I respect LeBron. I'm not a huge LeBron fan per se. Respect the game, respect how long he's done it for. I'm sure people will talk about the hit today. I think it's like anything else. Once you get down the line, you don't look at those things, get truly into it. A decade from now, nobody's going to talk about the playoff losses that he had. They're going to talk about the championships, the longevity, how he averaged over 20 points forever. I think that the conversation will always be had, and these moments just matter now because you're in the moment.
And Under Oath is a basketball podcast, just in case anybody was curious. We also are a basketball podcast. So, all right, gentlemen.
Under the basket.
That's why we come to the bench before, so we get it out of our system so that we can get into the good stuff for you.
You just said you want to bring something to the bench.
To the bench. There we
Come on.
There we go.
All right.
All but asking for it. All right, gentlemen. Today's charge: building a sales experience. What does it look like? How do we do it effectively? When a buyer comes to your firm, your company, whatever, how do you make sure that from beginning to end, that experience is meaningful, that it stands out from the other competitors in the space? Does it matter? Can you just create an awesome product and the experience, it doesn't matter because you're the best? Or is it the other way around? You can have a mediocre product, but an amazing experience and still win. That's what we're going to be discussing today. Let's start with our opening statements. For those new, our opening statements are really from our perspective in our roles. What's something we've learned as it relates to the topic? So in my case, I'll start us off. I'm in sales enablement and revenue operations. Something I've learned about building the sales experience is really one thing that you can do right away to understand how good or bad your sales experience is to go out and take a bunch of demos and to just take notes about how that process is. It's something that we've done in our capacity Rankings, that I've done in other roles, is once we get off that call and I'm excited and I'm like, wow, this is a really great product, I take a step back and I say, well, how much of it was the product and how much of it was what the seller did? How much was the follow-up? Was the materials they sent? Was the whole presentation, right? And the more I deconstruct that, I can say, okay, yes, the product may have been good, but here are all these other great things that made the experience of evaluating the product so much better than maybe the other people I evaluated. You should then take those findings directly back to whatever your experience is and compare them. What are you doing? What aren't you doing? Right? What are some things you've overlooked? I think, there are so many companies out there in the world. Anyway, so that's something I've learned. If you're looking to fine tune your process, go take a bunch of demos and you'll learn really quick who are the good ones and who are the bad ones. Cole, let's move to you. What's something you've learned in a sales leadership role, managing sellers, about the sales experience?
I've learned a lot, right? I think the one that comes to my mind when I think about experience is it is ever changing. For one, it's not a set it and forget it, right? It is something that has to continually be evolving. So that's the first piece. And I think the second piece is everything is part of the experience. The way in the sales world, the way your proposal looks, the way it enters their inbox, the follow-up you do, what you send to them 2 days later, right? How they hear about you the first time. Every single piece of your sales process, your engagement, is all collective into that experience. So it helps to walk through your process as well. Scott, you talked about, I think it's a great idea to hop onto others and look at their process. But if you haven't walked start to finish through your process and became a lead and walked through the stages and seen what you've got, I think that starts with the experience, is understanding what you have in front of you. But to tie it back to the original point, it's ever changing and it's really finite to have a really good sales experience.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a very common pitfall that people find themselves in, is they invest a little bit into it, and then that's just the way it's been for months, maybe years. And they don't realize that, oh, the competitor, they're doing all these other things. They're really evolving their experience, and you might have just been stuck in the dust. So that's great. I think we'll probably unpack that quite a bit more in this episode. Zach, what about you? In a leadership capacity where you are managing other leaders, what's something you've learned in that capacity about kind of building the sales experience?
Yeah, I'm going to actually zoom out a little, be past the sales experience, above it, from like the company standpoint.
Sure.
What I have really learned, and I'm going to hone in on gifting as part of the experience, and I'm sure we're going to dive into a lot of things here, but a gifting motion has taught us in sales that how to create the experience from the point of initial contact, right? What that has taught me as a leader is when you are really thinking and learning about gifting and creating an experience, and you're getting into finite details, right? How to truly make a difference to get that close, whatever it may be, to get them to show up to the booked appointment or even to get a booked appointment. The things I've learned is when you start paying attention to those details, you start paying attention to the details for gifting to your team, your internal team, your company, right? And I think a lot of people miss the boat on it being an experience for everyone, including your people, not just the people you're trying to bring in as a client, the people that's trying to bring them in as a client, right? Like you want to gift them, show them the experience that they're giving, right? Once people get to touch it and feel it and be a part of it, part of the conversations, part of the gifts that could be given, now you got that complete and total buy-in. It's hard to sell something when you've never test drove it before, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I've learned is it's not just about making an incredible experience for the potential consumer. It's making an experience for the person selling the consumer, like who's delivering on our side. So for me, it is, if you're going to make an experience happen and you're going to deep dive into it and you're going to get down into the finite details, think about your team as well as the potential customer you're going after.
I love that, because I think what a point you're touching on is demonstrating investment, right? So I think sometimes people get a little nervous about gifting because they're like, oh, well, I'm already paying per lead. I'm paying BDRs. I'm paying for all these things. And you want me to go out and pay even more for the gift, right? And so, sometimes when you're analyzing it from that standpoint, you're like, that's already so expensive. But the problem is the buyer doesn't see most of that, right? Most of what they're seeing is at the very tail end of that funnel, right? And a gift, it tends to be this really great first touch that they see. They're like, whoa, this person was willing to go out of their way to send me this really great thing. And I love that point you talked about, Zach, which is like, yes, it's, and we'll talk more about this. It's important to, send great gifts. You build a comprehensive and quality gifting motion externally, but that starts with the sellers. If your sellers or your team, if they feel valued, if they feel like they're being invested in, that changes their brains of like, oh, I'm, my company's investing in me, my firm's investing in me. How am I investing in the people that I'm prospecting? And I think sometimes that is actually kind of a subconscious thing, right? The more valued you feel, the more you want to kind of pass that value on to your prospective buyers. And sometimes that's obvious and sometimes that's subconscious. It's the confidence you have in the way you approach things, the delicate nature or the quality that you put into kind of your interactions. So yeah, I think that's really great. That's our opening statements. Now we're going to move into what we call cross-examinations. This is where I bring kind of a handful of questions and I want to really, pick Zach and Cole's brain here. Sometimes we have a guest and we'll kind of get their insights as well. In this case, we have Zach and Cole. And I want to talk just drill even more into this idea of building a sales experience. So I want to ask you both, a handful of questions here as we really crack this idea open. Cole, I'll start with you. Where does it begin, right? Like when we talk about the experience, right, you kind of mentioned all these different steps, right? There's the stuff that we send, the interactions, the demo, the slide deck, the proposal, all these things, right? Even post-sale, there's a whole other thing there, right? Where do you start with it? What's the first foundational piece you want to make sure you get right?
At its core, the beginning is your branding. How do you look? That starts your experience, because that's initially what catches people's eye is, how are you branded? How do you look? That's that grab, right? When we look at the sales process on our side, it starts with either an outreach from a BDR, or how does that first experience look like when I raise my hand and I want more information? So there's two different ways to think about the starting or the inception about it. I would say that your experience truly does start at your brand, though.
Yeah.
Do you look good on paper? That's a win in its own. But from the sales side, I'll dive into the outbound side. We really take pride in, once we're interacting with somebody, is positioning value, and then following up on that value with more value. Make sure we're connecting with them on a personal level on LinkedIn and staying in touch with them throughout that process. On our inbound side, we give them the opportunity to raise their hand for a call within 5 minutes. Hey, call me now. That's a great experience for them to get information quickly. It's also great for us to have people within the pipeline quicker. So I think there's different ways we could look at where it starts, but ultimately it's like anything with an experience. There's so many different avenues on an experience, but branding, key in your experience. Also how you're interacting with people as they're entering your business, key to start your experience as well.
I want to touch on that just a little bit. All three of us, I'm sure, get hundreds of prospecting emails all the time. And I would imagine you do a similar thing I do, which is on most of them, delete, archive, ignore, right? What are they missing, right? In some cases, I'm not even going to their website. I'm not even getting a chance to look at their branding and see what they're positioning. I'm just kind of already being annoyed, right? Zach, what separates the good from the bad on an outbound standpoint? Like what are the ones doing it right? What does it look like? And what does it look like doing it wrong?
I think for everybody, it's going to be different, the different answer for what kind of strikes them. For me, it's pretty clear and it's personalized. That if you want to get my attention, make it personalized. I can tell, it might be because I'm in sales and then have created these type of reach outs before, or engagements or cadences or whatever you want to call them, but I cannot stand a cookie cutter approach. The second you send me something that I deem as cookie cutter, I don't even care if I was interested in you. Unfortunately, I have very strong principles for a lot of people that reach out to me. So good luck, but it has to be personalized. And I'll use a couple examples. A few people that have gotten through me and I've taken demos over it is I've posted on Facebook, I believe, or LinkedIn about going to a Post Malone concert. And I took a picture that I was proud of, right? That I thought it was great. And they reached out based on that picture, right? And made some jokes about it or whatever it may be. And then got me reading the email. Good, strong subject line. I had another person, send me some, Post Malone is going to get brought up a lot in this, but send me Post Malone Oreos, right? But that was for a job interview. But nonetheless, still to capture my attention. I think a lot of people just, again, cookie cutter response. It's almost like they're checking boxes, right? And that's why I'm sure we'll get into this in other episodes and things, but I'm not a huge fan of like a cadence system because I think you become very robotic because of that. It's just click and send. And I think at the end of the day, personalization goes out the window when a lot of things become super automated.
Yeah.
Right. So I think there's a very fine line to walk there between automation and personalization.
Yeah. When I was onboarding, one of my favorite exercises that I would do is I would use my friend, his name's James, and I would say, all right, we're going to go to James's LinkedIn profile and we're going to send James an email, right? And normally what people do is they say, oh, you're the director of sales at this company. Maybe they might look at like a recommendation or look at what college you went to and be like, hey, whatever, or your company raised money, congrats or whatever. And so I'd say, resist the temptation to do that, right? Because all that stuff is so surface level, it's not going to reach over to James. What you want to do is use your creative mind. And so we'd go through this whole exercise where we'd say, look, the college James went to is in this really weird place. It's in Norwich, England. Why would somebody go to Norwich? Where is Norwich, England, right? And all of a sudden you go look it up and you realize they have a soccer team. You look kind of through his old posts, and it's clear that he has an interest in soccer. And, by doing just a little bit of extra research, you can find that James is a Norwich FC super fan. He loves Norwich, right? And it wouldn't be entirely obvious from looking at his LinkedIn or looking at the company's website, right? It takes a little bit of digging and a little bit of connecting the dots, right? Now, if you want to take it even a step further, which is what I try and get, I would try and get my sellers in the mindset of, which is go be proactive. If you have a pretty good sense that he's a Norwich FC super fan, go buy a scarf and send it to him. And go look up who's Norwich's rival, right? And it's Ipswich, right? Now you go in there and say, hey, don't you want to crush Ipswich? Don't you hate it when they get the edge on you for X, Y, and Z reason? That's why we have this service that, it's as satisfying as, getting a PK and winning Ipswich to go to the Champions League, or whatever, right? You've now stepped beyond just, hey, congrats on raising 50 million. Hey, saw the article in Forbes or whatever, that's all noise, right? It's not real personalization. It's pseudo personalization. That human element of what can really resonate. And your example, Zach, it's they had to find out you like Post Malone. They had to think, what would be something interesting, right? How do I make Zach laugh? How do I send him, should I send him something? Is it worth $10 in shipping if it can get me an interview? If it can get me in front of the decision makers, right? That's really how you need to be kind of viewing this stuff.
I might be a psychopath with this, and Scott, at the beginning, you said you hit delete on most of them. I read almost every one that comes through my email, maybe because I'm so obsessed with experience. I'm always looking to learn something more, looking to see somebody that strikes me. I've never seen that before. One, because I want to implement it on our side, because I want to win. But on the other side, as Zach said, when somebody is approaching us, a lot of them are cookie cutter. They use the same case studies. They use the same phrasing. There's no character within the email. It's just bland language. I think the more personalized you can make it, but also be creative, that goes a long way in just breaking the barrier or the norm on what comes through emails.
Yeah. I want to ask a question that is coming from a different direction, which is, what's something that you've removed from your sales process that's enhanced the experience, right? What's something that maybe you've had in place that you realized, this is slowing things down. This is actually, maybe we thought it was going to add a better experience, but it ended up not. Cole, do you have anything that comes to mind there?
Yeah, it was mentioned earlier on this, a cadence system. I think that's the standard when you look at, especially in outbound, is we got to have a cadence system. We got to have step 1 through 30 lined out, tell everyone what to do and exactly when to do it. And that was the thought process I had for a long time until I realized this is a broken system. This is just I think has become a norm when it shouldn't be. I think a lot of times what happens in cadence systems is that information starts to compile on top of one another. And then in 6 weeks, next thing you know, you wake up and you have 170 tasks in the morning to complete. And that's daunting. So what do? You do none of them, and you do what you were going to do anyways and just skip, move, send, and all the personalization, all the passion, all the creativity that could have been there is gone because you're overwhelmed with the tasks in front of you. So I like more so of individual ownership, really intentional outreach. Again, every time we're reaching out to someone, we should be positioning value. It's not about what we want. It's about what can we bring them to make them want us. So,
yeah, I think that's great. Sometimes I give this example. There's a company nearby. They're like a solar company, and they have a billboard. It's like Blue Raven Solar or something like that. And I say, so this is one form of marketing, right? It just says Blue Raven Solar. That's all it says, right? So if people who are looking for solar, they see it on the freeway, they're like, oh, maybe I should call these guys, right? And then go to your mailbox, and maybe they got a printout in some mailer, or maybe they're on the side of a baseball field or something like that, maybe with a call to action. It's like, hey, you want the most affordable solar, right? Something that provides a little more insight of who they are, right? But at the end of the day, Blue Raven Solar and most of these solar companies, they send someone knocking on doors. Now you can say well, why don't you just put more billboards out? Why don't you just send out more mailers, right? The reason that these companies still send door salesmen is because when you knock on someone's door and they open it up, that's a really uncomfortable conversation for a lot of people. It's hard. But those people who are like, weren't even thinking about solar, it wasn't even on their mind. They're able to get those people in a conversation. Like, hey, have you thought about it? Hey, can we run a free analysis of your electric bill or whatever it might be, right? I think it's so important to think about your outreach as, am I just a slightly more aggressive marketing email? Like, is that all that I am? Right? And sometimes a cadence can feel like that of like, what's the difference between me and what my marketing team is doing? And if that's a really small gap, I think you have a problem. There are going to be companies out there who are like, look, we have a cadence system. It works for us. We know maybe the thing you sell is really transactional. Sure. But at least in our case, if you're selling anything at a scale where it requires a contract and more than 30 days of, a deal cycle, you should be really unpacking, like, why am I treating this like a robot? Why am I treating this so automated when really I should be going about it the other way, right? I should treat every conversation like I have stepped into their office and I'm like, hey, can I meet everybody in your floor, right? Like, we understand that conceptually, where it's like, yeah, if you walked into the office of someone, you would do everything so differently as opposed to sending like the most generic, bland email. So anyway, I just think it's important to recognize, like, what are you doing? Is it meaningful at all? And yeah, I think for our case, removing the cadence system was a big win for us. Zach, what about you? What's something you've seen maybe removed that's enhanced the experience for buyers?
I think I'm going to double down on cadence. I cannot tell you how much not having a cookie cutter process changes what you do and how people feel. I think it's impactful that all three of us feel that way and that we're bringing it up, because I've been at companies that use cadence systems and we implemented it for one reason, is they didn't trust the sellers.
Sure.
That's what it comes down to. You're not making good hires, and hires that aren't paid appropriately and aren't trained appropriately need to be robotic and in our cadence system. And that is how you ensure that you micromanage to death and you can churn people and they can come in and do the cadence system. It's like an assembly line.
Yeah.
And I know that might rub people the wrong way, but at the end of the day, I mean, I truly believe that in my heart. If you have to implement a true cadence system, I don't disagree with having a library of things to be able to choose from and personalize inside of HubSpot or Salesforce or Pipedrive or whatever you're using. But to have a task automated that you come in and you're just checking boxes and you make $300 a day on an auto dialer and stuff, just go ahead and chalk it up that you're going to have a lot harder time making sales. And listen, people do it every single day, right? All day. They make sales doing that exact same system I just stated. It's to each their own. But for us and the way we do things, we have learned that personalization, quality over quantity, wins 99 out of 100 times for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Zach, we made a change not too long ago. I'm curious if you have more insight or how you feel about it, but I think this would qualify. Up until recently, we had what I think a lot of people have, which is somebody goes to our web form and they want to book a meeting and it books direct to the AE. And that's a great system. In some situations that kind of it gets you straight to the seller. You don't have this extra call in between. And so there's this like sense that, like this is going to speed it up, right? But we ended up we had that and then we kind of moved away from it. And we ended up putting someone in between. What was the reasoning behind that decision?
So I think it's twofold. One, first and foremost, is your AEs or time is the most valuable that you have, right? We have a few senior AEs, a key AE that their calendars with the BDRs that we have and the inbound motion that we have, their calendars fill up quickly. And time is the most important thing that they have. And we were just realizing that people were coming through as spam and taking up a 30-minute time slot, spam pretty frequently, 6 months ago before we changed this. And then it gets to the point to where now the AE's frustrated, right? All these leads suck, right? All these leads are terrible that I'm getting. I'm wasting my day. So now you're talking about morale. You're talking about culture. Now, and then I prep for these, I prep for this. And it's not something like it wasn't a qualified lead. So now you're looking at like, man, not only are we wasting time, our AE's time, or one of our most valuable assets, now the culture's going down, the momentum's going down. So that's one piece for us that we looked at. The second piece is when you're in growth mode, the way I feel that we are, you have to start building a bench of people that can become that senior AE. right? Not a lot of people get to go straight from senior BDR to senior AE. It's a complicated jump. And we figured that, okay, we can save our AE's time, our senior AE's time by running this first appointment to weed out spam and all these things, ensure we got qualified appointments. But on the other side, these senior BDRs who have earned the right, or regular BDRs who have earned the right to run these first time appointments, now they are getting to learn how to speak the lingo. They're getting used to talking to our ICP. They're learning to weed through people. So now they're getting repetition for that next role, right? And then we have other steps that get them closer to that senior AE to be more part of the process. So it was really kind of two birds, one stone scenario of giving more time with better leads to our senior AEs, helps morale, helps sales. Good. Those are all good things. And then helping build up a bench to, as more leads come in, we have people prepared to step into that senior AE role to start selling. Again, all good things. So the pros and cons list, the pros are a lot more heavy on the pros than the cons. But there's cons to everything as well.
Yeah, I think there's another component of this specific change that ties into experience as well, which is the experience of the person who's raising their hand, right? I raise my hand and I say, I want an appointment with you. I book on an AE's calendar. It's 3 days out. You get an automated email that says, hey, thank you for your appointment. We look forward to talking to you. Nothing for 3 days, right? And the first time you talk to us is that call 3 days later. Now, in pivoting to this, regardless of when you book, you're getting outreach, you're getting specialized information. You have a touch point with somebody. There's a qualified conversation all within the day that you're booking that meeting. You have a lot more value and a new experience that you didn't have before. Before you were like, I raised my hand, I want this, I'm interested. We also saw that because of this, our show rates go up on inbound, right? It's no longer dictated on just the client waiting to show up for that hand raise. They have value on the front end now because they've spoke to somebody or had personalized information go out to them. So overall, just one simple change changed our experience in 3 or 4 different areas, internally and externally.
Yeah. And I think this goes to kind of what we talked about at the beginning of the episode, Cole, which is an ever-evolving process, right? That tool that we were using before, yeah, it costs money. It was implemented with good intent, and you could make the case for it, right? Of like, hey, this is going to be so great. We save a call, it goes straight to the AE. Look at all these wins, right? And we had it for a while. And then at a certain point, we said, well, hang on. Is this the right way to do it? And even in that process, in that change, we changed it one way. We said, you know what, there's a slightly better way to do this. We're going to change it another way. And we ultimately found a way that, yeah, I think to your point, Zach, there's more pros than cons, right? Every decision you have some trade-offs as long as it's weighted in that right direction, right?
For me too, and I'm kind of going to go on the opposite side of what you said in the beginning, Scott, about for an experience whenever you go through other people's demos, that you are getting to see how you do your experience. I think there's a flip side of that as well, is how many people have we hired or met with from a demo purpose that have told us how good our process is, that, hey, I'm going to steal that from you. Hey, we've hired agencies that audit us, and they've come back and be like, we're going to recommend this to the other people we audit. Like that. Now that is a big check mark for us. Like that is something we double down on. Where else can we put this in as an experience?
I'm going to tie this back to the basketball podcast that we are here. To me, that's almost like getting an autograph. Like if I was a celebrity and somebody asked for my autograph, that has to be such a validating moment of your success, right? That somebody wants to take that time. When you're on a demo or something, they're like, I really like that sales process that you guys have. We're going to deal. That's my autograph moment. I feel like a celebrity then. So,
yeah, I think it's a good barometer too. If whatever process you've had, if no one's really saying anything about it, you're not getting any kudos, you're not getting any compliments, whatever, that could be a leading indicator that maybe the process has gotten a little stale. You want to be ever evolving. And I think this is why, Zach, we invest in enablement and operations, and people kind of always examining, re-examining, getting feedback from the sellers, being a part of the process, really never being complacent, right? The moment you get complacent, you're like, no, we're good, we're fine. Like that's when things get stale. That's when you start losing that lead that you had.
It's a great point, Scott. It's something that I would highly recommend. I know it's not a cheap endeavor for people and not everyone can do it right now, but the second you have the money to spare, go get audited. Like go find somebody who audits companies and your processes every day, all day. They see hundreds of companies, and their job is to come in and poke holes in what you do and make it better. We've done it a couple times now. Again, it really highlights what you do well, and it really highlights where you can get better. And I think the day, to what you just said, you stop seeking out where we're doing bad, is the day you're in trouble, because you can always improve. To Cole's
Always.
point, it's ever evolving. The experience is ever evolving. Things change, new systems come out, new softwares, the market changes. This thing right here changed everything, right? It's why we are so much about this quickness. This, people get impatient. It's why we do a call back almost instantaneously if somebody wants it, because the second I don't call you back, guess where you're headed? To the next one on the list. And it's a now or never. So I think it's a great point that it's ever changing. Pay for somebody to audit you, be willing to take the advice, and change our company.
Yeah, love it. And for those who are listening, Zach held up his phone just there. So that's what he was talking about.
Come on, Bo. I'm looking at a video. Leave me alone. Yes, the phone. Yes, the phone changed it.
All right, let's move into our objection part of the episode. This is where we take maybe a modern convention or some status quo idea, or something that is, maybe commonly believed or practiced by people in the space, and we object to it, and we give our reasons why. Cole, let's start with you. What's something that you object to when it comes to building a sales experience, or the sales experience in general?
This is an episode of doubling down here, and I'm doubling down on people create an experience and then leave it. I created an experience. It's experience done. Let's move on to the next task. Object. You have to change it. You have to ever evolve. Even if you think it's picture perfect, it's not, because times change, things change, your competition gets better. So you have to consistently be looking at how people are experiencing your company. And again, that comes down to your branding. Maybe it's new colors, refreshed logo. Maybe it's down to how you interact with people or what you're sending them to. I still get newsletters in the mail from 6 years ago from companies that I worked at that are exact same, right? Nothing's changed, right? And I still keep up with them. And I'm like, man, this is still the same stuff that I was there when I was an AE, So it's so important that you evolve everything about your business consistently to keep up with the times. Zach held up the phone and said it best. That is always evolving. And the reason why there's a new one every year is because it's incrementally better, right? Better camera, better this, whatever it is, but it's a better experience over and over again. How many iPhones have we bought, right? So it's the same thing for your business when you're looking at leads or, how you're interacting with people. You have to constantly be evolving.
I think to another point there is sometimes it can feel like those evolutions need to be big and sweeping, and usually they're not. I can think of several instances in our own org where we realized there was a problem. We said, hey, this could probably address that problem. We roll it out and we're like, hey, this is great. It's fixing all these, what a win. And then 6 months later, there was just a little bit of friction with it. We said, all right, let's just see what else is out there. And we adopted something that was not 100 times better. It was probably, honestly, like 10% better. But we looked at that and we said, you know what? Like that 10%, that's worth it to us, right? Because that's 10% better of an experience for the AEs. Going back to what you said, Cole, they're not getting frustrated. They're able to, to build stuff quicker, send stuff faster, more elegantly, whatever, right? And so you shouldn't necessarily always be looking for these 5x, 10x changes. Like, yeah, of course, if you can make those changes, awesome. But a lot of these things are marginal. They're saying, hey, what's gonna help the business 5%, 10%? Sometimes that's a new tool. Sometimes that's pausing on a process. We talked about this, I think, a few episodes ago. We thought that integrating a dialer into our solution made sense. And so we went through this whole long evaluation process. And I think it would have been really easy to be like, you know what, let's just pick one of these and we'll work it out. And at the end of the day, we said, actually, no, we're not going to do it. That's not the right move. They're what's available to us right now. That's not going to move the chains. It's a wash, or in some cases, a moving back in the wrong directions, even though it might seem like, oh, this is going to speed up the amount of calls and this. Yeah, but you're these other trade-offs, right? So always be looking for those marginal improvements, because those things aggregate, they stack up, right? Zach, what about you? What's something you object to?
What I object to is pinching pennies to make more profit. And the reason why is because most people won't start a gifting motion because it costs money. Most people won't pay extra for the hires because they're more expensive. Most people won't buy the right tech because it's more expensive. They won't invest in the training programs because it's more expensive.
Yeah.
And I think if we have learned anything here in our time together is paying people what they're worth, get you the right people. Getting the training people in that know how to train to make it personalized pays for itself. Getting the right tech that takes out roadblocks and bumps in the road makes people better. It makes the experience better. Putting in a gifting motion changes an experience. And I would be willing to bet anything that we have made more money by investing the amount of money than we have than if we ever would have just pinched pennies and tried to squeeze the lemon for every drop that it had in it. And you see it all the time, and I'm thankful for it because it puts us above the block that much quicker. I love when people start cutting corners because it just makes us look that much better, and it makes what we do that much easier. And we get to take great talent as well, right? Because people want to work for companies that do it the right way and create an awesome experience. Again, not for just the client, but for the employees of a company. So I would object to cutting corners.
Yeah, I think this manifests in so many different ways. And I think you hit on a bunch of them, Zach, where, it would be nice if we had this, but we just can't. You can't really justify it right now. Just make do with what you have. So that experience gets passed on of like, hey, we're just making do with what we have, right? I think there's a time and a place to be scrappy, right? If you're a young...
And I want to make an important key note
a qualifier.
Right? Yes, I'm not saying if you do not have the money to go in debt, borrow, sometimes you have to bootstrap it, right? You have to create the experience with what you have. You can create experiences with handwritten notes for $1 or whatever it is to send out, right? Like at the end of the day, you don't have to have this insane gifting motion to make a unique experience. You might only be able to afford one superstar AE. You don't need 3, right? At the end of the day, I'm not saying go get in debt and do all these things. But if you have the money and you're only doing it to take a little bit more profit for yourself as an owner or a board or whatever it may be willing to take 10 or 20% of that and put it back. I promise you, it will come back tenfold.
Yeah. I think the other way that this, cutting corners, so to speak, is they say, well, we can't invest in the experience or these tools or this tech or this training. All we can do is just throw more bodies at the problem because the bodies are going to give us a number and that'll solve the problem. And it's like, well, at certain stages, you get to a point where you're saying, hey, we understand the process. We've got it dialed. We need to grow the team. Yep. But so often I see this, coming from tech, I feel like I saw it. Every company in the Valley was just like, oh, well, the process is whatever. We're just going to throw 20 more bodies at it and that'll fix it because we can depend on some amount of them hitting quota or whatever. And it's like, no, man, I live at least our approach here where we say, look, I would rather get all of our AEs at capacity where they're like, I can't take another demo. And then we expand, right? And I would rather say, okay, we've hit these metrics over a certain period. Now let's expand out, right? And make sure that we can actually scale the way we want. There's still room for ambitious goals and there's still room to, to take big swings. But so often people are willing to invest just in bodies instead of all the other things. You kind of have to have this nice, delicate balance of both.
To your point, what you just said, Scott, is putting our AEs or our senior AEs to max capacity. Maybe the solve is taking a different type of employee and giving capacity back, right? Because they are, in our scenario, they were getting spam leads. They were getting things on their calendar that was taking up their time. So there are other avenues. Maybe your AE right now today is at capacity, but it's not maybe in this person's company we're talking about hiring another AE. It's hiring a gatekeeper for that AE, right? Which is a cheaper alternative. And then again, it's a training session to make them that next AE that steps into the starting block. So I think there's many ways to look at things. There's many ways to skin a cat, so to say, right? I think that sometimes you just have to be able to take a step back and look at it and have everybody in the organization be looking at it, right? That this isn't just a one person type decision. You want everybody involved.
Yeah, 100%. All right, my objection here is this is going to be targeted a little bit to the seller because I've just seen this a lot. And it's the idea here is that the experience is up to someone else. it's not my job to create the experience. Marketing's got to make the branding, enablement's got to make me the assets, right? The gifts got to come from somebody else, and I just kind of manage it. I object to that. You want those things happening, right? You want a really good marketing team, you want a really good brand, you want that stuff going, of course. But you are the master, the commander of the deal, and it is incumbent on you to make that experience seamless and meaningful and powerful. And that starts on your terms. So if there isn't a beautiful asset out there, you go and find a way to make it beautiful. If you need to get a case study and there's no one, we don't have anybody who makes them, go out and find somebody who can make it, right? If you need, like one of our AEs, he's like, hey, part of what I do requires a whole bunch of recapping and doing some of this kind of prep work and research. I'm just going to go pay somebody to do that part for me so I can focus on the selling part, so I can focus on synthesizing it and doing it, right? And he just paid for it out of pocket. He's just like, yeah, I'm just going to pay for it. It's worth it to me because it'll turn into better demos and more closed ones. And sure enough, he's the number one seller and he's absolutely smashing it, right? Because he was willing to say, hey, like, what's this going to cost me, extra $100 a month or whatever it might be? And we get a little nervous sometimes as sellers. We're like, well, it's somebody else's problem. Like somebody else, I need a case study. I don't know how to get it. Go walk over to the customer success department and say like, hey, I'm looking for a customer like this. Do you feel comfortable with me calling them? Next time you're on a call with them, would you mind if I talk to them? Hey, I'm looking for this specific, just go and build it, right? Get a really meaningful quote from somebody. Like you can own this process and you can make it meaningful. Even if that means you got to handwrite a letter, you got to go send somebody a pie, you got to go walk into their office, whatever it might be. Until that motion scales up and until you're able to have people and parties who are really interested in making everything dynamic and improving it, sometimes it's going to be on you. My advice is the best sellers I know this, and they're willing to invest in that experience. And sometimes that means paying out of pocket. Sometimes that means staying a little late. Sometimes it's coming early. That means going out of your comfort zone and building relationships and talking to people across the department. But like, that is how you win. That is how you provide an experience for your buyers.
Hey, Scott, here's just something to end on that. Not only do the best sellers do that and get the most sales, they also end up at the best companies because they're best people at getting interviews because they create an experience to get it.
That's right. Yeah. And so to the sellers listening, again, I'm big on self-reflection. What are you doing to provide the experience? Are you pushing that off to other people to be like, well, it's not my fault that, this is the only one pager we have. It's like, go get a better one. Go make it more interesting. Go make it more applicable to them. It doesn't necessarily always have to be perfectly shiny. Yeah, of course you want that, but like, find a way. Like that's when we talk about grit and we talk about those who find a way to win, that's what it is. What are you doing to find a way to win, right? And in this context, we're talking about the experience. It's really easy to be like, it's not my problem. It is your
I
problem.
completely agree with this. Scott. It is the person selling, they truly are the artist or the painter, right? Everything else is the paint, but they got to put it together. So they're the ones who really controls the experience at the end stage. So I love that point, Scott.
Okay, boys, we'll wrap up this episode with our closing arguments. Cole, we'll start with you. What one closing bit you want to leave with our listeners?
Yeah, I would say the biggest takeaway for me is, and this is just simple, 2 words: experience matters. It is as simple as that. If you're looking at it every day, and how I love that piece that you brought in, Scott, which is taking ownership. If you're taking ownership of your experience, and Zach is taking ownership of the experience, and Scott, you're taking ownership of the experience, that experience will matter in more ways than one, and the returns on that will be massive. So experience matters.
Love that. Zach, what about you? What's one thing you want to leave the Under Oath listeners with?
I think I would just do a combination of everything we talked about. And if you said it for a bumper sticker, right? So let's try to make it short. And I'd say invest in experience.
Yeah. And I'll take that, a similar version of that, which I would say, always evolve your experience. Never settle on your experience. That might be a better way to say it, right? It's so easy to let it get stale. So easy to invest in it and then to never look behind you again, right? Always be thinking about it. Always hire people who are thinking about it. That should be part of when you're bringing on people, especially, in my function, sales support, enablement, rev ops, sales operations, things like that. That's something that you should be looking for. What do you think about the sales process? What are the things that you would improve? How would you improve it? How do you think about that kind of stuff? Right? Are you looking for gaps, or you're just waiting for someone to tell you gaps? Go find them. Go find people who want to find them and make them better and fix them. Okay, boys. I didn't gavel at the beginning of the episode.
Oh,
We'll
it's all
have
right.
it-
We'll conclude with it.
we'll conclude with the Apple. We appreciate you guys tuning in to Under Oath. We have episodes every Wednesday, obviously. Give us a rating on Spotify or Apple. Share us on LinkedIn with your network. Just, hey, if you like this podcast, whatever space you're in, reach out to us. Give us some feedback. We'd love to hear from you. That's going to do it for Under Oath today. Courtroom is now closed.
Under